I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth and today I've got a panel, if you will, of ballistic gurus. I've got, to my left, Senior Ballistician Jayden Quinlan in the corner.
I am in the corner
coincidentally enough, and across the table, special guest and reoccurring guest on the show, one we love to have back, author, ballistician Jeff Siewert. Thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. And everybody already knows, if they've been listening to the podcast, that we love having Jeff on. And, you know, it goes back a long ways, your relationship with Hornady, and then with the Ammunition Demystified, the non-Bubba's guide to how ammo really works. I'll tell you what, I've seen more every year since you've been on the podcast. I get more and more people that are referencing that book. I see it on social media. I see people texting me. Hopefully you're seeing it on the sales side. It's just a really cool thing.
Hopefully I remember what I wrote.
Yeah. Well, listener, if you're out there and this is the first you've heard of it, you need to check out that book. You need to go back and you need to listen to the Hornady Podcast episodes where we have Jeff. And we did this social media thing where we had, two ballistic scientists ask us anything kind of stuff. We did that on social media, and I've got some good questions peeled away for you to answer for the group. Now, before we get there, our last episode with Jeff, we talked about gain twist, among many other things, but we talked about the gain twist. Now, in the world of precision rifles and precision rifle competition, nobody gave a care at all about gain twist. There was an immediate and dramatic climb in popularity, and then an equal drop in demand and popularity of the gain twist for whatever reason. And it was really nice to see Jeff's numbers that he made on the usefulness of a gain twist. Well, Jeff, you went back, you went into the books, you made some more numbers, and we got to tie up some loose ends on the gain twist before we get to the Q&A.
Yeah, so I started off with the H4350 because that one seemed to line up the most closely with the test results. And I did a little study to check on which of the gain twist functions gave us the most improvement reduction in group size. And so I'm going to present those results for you today.
Yeah, and as I don't know the results, but it sounds like this one was a little bit more exciting than what you found the first couple times.
This was a complete surprise to me, and yeah, you're never too old to learn. So.
I guess. Well, let's hear it.
Yeah. So just to recap the simulations that I did previously on the 140 grain ELDM with H4350 turned out to match the test data pretty closely. Got lump mass and beam element models of the projectile and of the barrel for both the cup and core bullet and the 130 grain CX bullet. So we studied both of those. The barrels, I did the Hornady test fixture, basically a constant diameter tube held at the middle, which is the way you guys test, plus what I'm calling a sniper barrel, which is a long taper, and it's restrained at the aft end at the receiver. Free floated the whole bit. Okay. And then I looked at basically three different gain twist functions. The first was a parabolic gain twist, which is what we said, we'd lean that way.
If you're going to pick one. And then I looked at the linear gain twist. Basically, the rifling angle changes in a completely linear fashion between the start of the rifling, which is usually selected to be half of the exit twist, and then a few calibers before exit, you make a transition to the constant twist at muzzle exit. And then also I looked at a sinusoidal gain twist. So there's a very slow and progressive change in rifling angle from the initial angle to the final angle. And we start the gain, again, general rules are you start the gain right at the travel at peak pressure. So that's how these things are all designed. Okay.
So it's a bit of a at this point an academic exercise, but we're hoping we can kick the can down the road a little bit and get some people to test it. Here's a plot of the exit spin. The spin versus travel in Bohr, and you can see that the constant twist, the spin comes up pretty rapidly, compared to the other gain functions. The intermediate parabolic is the next quickest, and then the linear gain twist and the sinusoidal gain twist come up much more slowly, which is kind of an interesting occurrence, I guess you could use the word. And for me, the interesting part was how that affects both the exit states. We covered the last time the angular rate, the wobble part, plus the cross velocity part, along with the dispersion. And for some barrels, whether it's the test fixture or the sniper barrel, how you restrain the barrel really influences the results that you get, which was, again, a little bit of a surprise for me. And then, this is something that in my 40 years of study in ballistics, I never, ever studied prior. So this is new territory for me. Got a plot here of torque versus travel. And the black line here, you see the constant twist. There's an initial spike in torque as the bullet makes the transition from the case to the very fast constant twist rifling as the bullet starts to engage the rifling. And then all of the other gain functions have a much lower spike because your starting angle is half of what the constant twist exit angle is.
Right.
And then whatever those gain functions do for you, they that torque versus travel is dependent on whatever mathematical function you provide and how that barrel is made. And so here I've got for Hornady test fixture barrel with benign straightness. Benign straightness is 2/10,000ths. Again, half sine wave bore profile in one plane. That's pretty small. And I chose that because it's easy to compute the bore profile and it's simple. So okay, we'll move on from there. And you can see that the exit states for the constant twist barrel up here in the upper left-hand corner are very different than the intermediate linear gain twist. Much lower exit states, much lower cross velocity, and generally speaking, lower yaw rates as well, which is very interesting in my book. The intermediate parabolic gain twist, everything's kind of a big fat line down at the bottom. Again, interesting. And then the intermediate sinusoidal gain, again, kind of everything's concentrated at the low end. And so let me ask you guys a question. When you bring barrels into house, you have some sort of a testing procedure that you have?
Yeah, generally they get a reference sample shot through them. So let's say it's ammo, it's a pressure and velocity barrel.
Mm-hmm.
It'll go through some sort of readiness process, whether you want to call that a break-in or whatever. But the shooting of the reference ammo is what technically certifies if this barrel is acceptable for use in our testing.
And if it's above, I'm not trying to pry any proprietary secrets out of you, but if it's more than 30% over the reference dispersion, you don't use that barrel for that testing.
There's a threshold. It has to shoot. It's a pass or fail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes if it doesn't, sometimes you just put a few more rounds on it, season it up a little bit, go back, clean it, try it again. Sometimes just putting some more rounds on it has helped. I remember doing that years ago.
The Hornady CX Copper Alloy Expanding Bullet. CX bullets feature the advanced heat shield tip that resists aerodynamic heating and provides a consistently high BC. Hard-hitting and deep penetrating, CX bullets are constructed of rugged monolithic copper alloy that retains 95% or more of their original weight for devastating terminal performance. Available in factory-loaded ammunition as well as component bullets for reloaders. CX bullets from Hornady.
Okay. So we're going to go on to the next one. Now the moderate straightness. So this one's got half a thou max bore deflection. Okay, again, that's still the very benign half sine wave. And the constant twist, the cross velocity just took off. I mean, it spiked. It's like, okay. And so, but all of the other gain twist functions, though, that cross velocity portion is considerably reduced compared to the constant twist, that's
pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, like we ought to be thinking about using these on a more regular basis. Then I looked at the sniper barrel. Again, benign straightness, 2/10,000ths of an inch. And the cross velocity portion is in a wide band, all above everything else. And the gain twists are all considerably reduced as a result of that. Like, okay. So the restraints on the barrel, along with the barrel taper, play into the response that you get.
That is interesting.
So again, we got to go test this. I mean, we got to be dedicated about, okay, this is the result that shows analytically. It's time to go build some and test them out. Then I looked at the sniper taper barrel with the moderate straightness, again, half a thou, and everything's up as you might imagine, but the gain twist barrels are distinctively different than the constant twist, and generally speaking, lower.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the constant twist is that the cross velocity is kind of in a band up above everybody else, and there's no low spots. So that's kind of a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah.
So this is a graph that shows the relative dispersion.
Now that's where the rubber meets the road for the user is like, okay, what does this mean for me on paper?
Yeah, what size groups can I shoot with this? And in the Hornady test fixture barrel, with the benign bore curvature, the 2/10,000ths, that's all the same and it's all very low. And the differences among them are very, very small, and you'd have to do a truckload of testing to
see a difference,
to sort that out. If it's a moderate curve, that's a different story. In that one, let me see here. We're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of about a 10% improvement if you went with the intermediate sinusoidal gain, which that might be worth pursuing, but you got to spend a lot of resources to prove that it's different.
Yeah, prove 10%.
Prove 10%.
That's a lot of shooting.
That's a lot of shooting, and we'll cover that here in just a few more slides. Okay. For the sniper barrel, the gain twists, all of them, even in the benign case, are below the constant twist. And again, those numbers, you'd have to do a lot of shooting to prove that guy. For the sniper barrel with the moderate bore curvature, the linear gain twist and the sinusoidal gain twist kind of stand out in the fact that they're much lower than the constant twist and much lower than the intermediate parabolic gain twist. So there's something going on there that warrants further investigation, in my opinion.
Sure.
Okay. I did the same study, but with the CX bullet.
Yeah.
And the CX bullet, because it is so stiff in bending compared to the ELDM bullet, it shows more benefit from the gain twist.
This is pretty remarkable, and it's weird because the 130 CX and the 140 ELD match, extremely similar shape. Ogive length, bearing surface length, boat tail, angle, and length. They're very, very similar bullets from a shape standpoint.
Yeah. Now we need to talk a little bit about the models, and we'll cover that in just a little bit when we start. We'll start. Just remind me. We'll cover that.
Okay.
But anyway, I did a different velocity variation with that instead of using 7 feet per second, which is what we had for data on the H4350. I assumed it was 10 feet per second. So it's a little bit higher And I think from the differences in engraving pressures, that's probably warranted.
Yep.
Okay. So, but again, interestingly, linear gain twist and the sinusoidal gain twist showed kind of crowding 20% improvement in dispersion, which
that's a big number.
you'd be selling your grandmother for that.
Yeah, especially, I mean, 20% is pretty sizable when you're talking already a relatively small group. You know, what I'm going to call a normal bolt action rifle.
Yeah,
Generally, they're pretty accurate.
So you might have to test at extended ranges to go to be able to pick out the differences. That's all I'm saying. When you go test this, you might need to do some different things, different out of the box kind of testing.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that obviously in the extremely advanced simulations you're able to predict this, and then historically, a lot of that's been supported by physical testing, and this is really neat because the audience, Jayden and I, we're experiencing this in real time. That you've modeled this up.
Yep.
Now we can get product in, begin the testing, and I'm sure there's other people doing it as well.
So, from a modeling perspective, the monolithic copper bullets are much stiffer in bending. Okay, particularly at the base of the ogive, which is where the last place the bullet contacts the bore. Okay, the cup and core bullets, because you've got lead, and lead's, yes, it's a lot more dense, but it's also much lower yield strength. And then how that lead interfaces in shear with the cup can change the damping. We don't cover damping in the model. So there are other things that are not in the model that might be a big factor. So we don't really know.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, there's one thing that the gain twist does that the constant twist can't do that might actually lead to more benefit, and that's the constant movement of the contact point between the forward bore lay of the bullet and the rifling, the land tops. Okay, so that might help keep the clearances, the effective inbore clearances, smaller, and you might actually get more benefit out of using the gain than I've predicted. So there's a lot we don't know yet.
But there's a lot of testing needs to be done, but it's cool to be at the forefront of that.
Absolutely.
There's a lot we don't know yet. So here I've got a little graphic of the dispersion and different dispersion metrics. And I've got extreme spread on there, or the average average circle for a 5-shot extreme spread. I've got a circle for mean radius, and I've got a circle for standard deviation of averaging 5-shot X and Y. Okay. And so you got to ask yourself, which metric is the most efficient for starters? And then what is it about the dispersion model or the statistical model that we like, or what don't we like? And so the benefits of having a statistical model are the fact that you don't have to worry about the loose trigger nut messing up the test, right? You don't have to worry about things like copper fouling or carbon fouling screwing up the test. Is it the real world? No, but it's what you should expect long term when you do these tests. So that's why those statistical models are useful. It tells us what we should expect if we do our part.
Right. Yeah, that's the tough part, doing your part.
Yeah, and it's I mean, from doing ballistics testing, it's really hard to do the test and pick at only one thing.
Yes.
I mean, it's yeah.
And then you have to pick at that thing, the one thing. You can only change that one thing, and then you have to do a sample size enough to actually make it valid.
Yeah, and it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task. So what I've got here is a plot of the average group variability, and I've circled the variability for a 3-shot ES, which is about 90% of the true dispersion. And then I've also circled 5-shot sigma x, sigma y, or mean radius. And those two are back, down under 30% of the true dispersion. So that's, when we talked about this prior, if you're going to do testing, you really need to use all of the data.
Yeah.
Using 2 shots out of 5 doesn't make a lot of sense. So, So let's go on. Let's talk about how many shots are needed for a 10% difference.
That's a tough one, because if you're trying to
Big number.
expose 10% benefit, change, whatever.
It's a big number. So the numbers I've got on my slides here say that at 90% confidence level, that means you're wrong 1 time out of 10. It takes 170 shots.
Whoa.
If you want 95% confidence level, it's 280.
Now that's would say your groups are too small.
That's
Yeah.
That's a pile of resources to go prove that.
It really is.
You got to be careful, Jeff, because we got yelled at for recommending 20 shots.
Yeah.
You recommended 260.
Yeah. Well,
they're going
and
to come after you with their pitchforks.
Reality is there, though. When you're talking
Yeah.
a 10% difference. So let's say you're a bench rest guy or an F-class guy, and you're trying to, air quote, tune your load, and you're punching paper at 100, 200, 300 yards, whatever you're doing, and you're shooting just bug hole groups. I mean, it's not uncommon to shoot inch or less groups at 300 yards in these bench rest competitions,
Yep.
right? So if you're trying to expose a 10% difference, it stands to reason when you really zoom out that, yeah, you need to pound a lot of shots into that group to expose 10%. Otherwise, you're just chasing your tail.
Now, again, this is with statistical significance.
Right, exactly.
So if you're willing to accept less
Then 90%.
less than 90%, that's on you.
Right. And most guys are looking for significantly more than a 10% difference.
Yeah.
Because you go talk, okay, that bench rest example, right? You have a 3/4 inch group. Well, 10% of that is very, very small. That's 70 thousandths.
Yeah.
So your ability, that's why you have to shoot so many shots, is because you're trying to make a valid determination that there is a 70 thousandths difference between these two.
Yeah. You're talking about measuring differences small enough, you could accurately measure them with sheets of paper, right? A sheet of paper 4 or 5 thousandths thick. That's not very many sheets of paper thick.
Right.
We're talking tiny.
Right. And another thing people should keep in mind too is that as the true dispersion or cone of fire gets worse, you need more samples for it to be defined. So if the crazy other end of that spectrum would be, let's say you had a gun and system that shot one hole. Every single bullet went into one hole. Well, how many shots do you need to determine the cone of fire of that gun? 1, because they all go into one hole.
Right.
And if they went into 2 holes and every single shot went into 2 holes, you can see how as that grows, if the true cone of fire of the gun is, 5 inches at 100, your random 3 shots are not, or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 are not going to encompass it.
It's the problem I faced shooting a shotgun, trying to get that doggone thing sighted in. Like I always shot at 50 yards because if I went any further, things were splattered all over the place.
Yeah.
And
a literal shotgun pattern.
Well, not quite, but close. Okay. So then I've got plots for 15% difference, and it's 80 shots at 90% confidence level, 130 shots at 95.
So that what brought it in half?
Mm-hmm. Just about.
By going from 10 to 15% difference?
Yeah, just about in half.
Yeah.
Just about in half.
That's pretty interesting for the listener.
Yeah. Yeah, and then 20% difference, you're at 50 shots for 90% confidence and 80 shots for 95. And what 80 shots means is 40 controls and 40 new samples.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and again, the assumptions that I've made here are that the dispersion variability is a function of the true dispersion. So if you cut the true dispersion by 20%, the variability gets cut by I won't say a proportional number, but a number that's related to that.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, that's what I was saying with if it shoots one hole, there's no variability. You don't have to test very many to get a true picture of what it's doing, but the more variability, the more you have to test.
Right. So in all of these cases, the sigma X, sigma Y average was the most efficient.
Yeah. Mean radius, essentially.
Mean radius is next.
Okay.
But the difference between those two is generally not large.
Okay.
Generally not large. And I also plotted these things up as a number of shots in the group, and kind of keeping the group number of shots in the group small seems to be beneficial, because once you've fired enough shots to prove that they're different, you're not expending a bunch of other shots.
Right.
So sticking with 5, probably a decent idea.
Okay.
Okay.
And then you can aggregate those, of course.
And you need to aggregate them, and that's kind of the big deal. So one of the things I've started thinking on my way out here was how do we improve? How do we do load development differently? I've got some things I'm thinking about, and maybe when I come through again, I will have some things to think about.
That would be great and welcomed, because I feel like Jayden just handled an email from a consumer just this week that this wasn't necessarily the topic or the question, but it was related to it, that we are, as an industry, we're just now trying to get the general shooter and hobbyist comfortable with mean radius over group extreme spread. So there's an uphill battle just based on even entry-level statistics that the consumer and the hobbyist and the reloader just maybe aren't ready for yet. So we need to broach that just way of measuring things and sampling things, and then doing it a little bit more efficiently. Never hurt.
So in the last few years, I've been trying to teach classes out in Fort Collins to some of the more dedicated shooters and reloaders, and I kind of smashed the statistics in with the load development stuff, and that was the best way to I won't say spoon feed, but to make the topic palatable.
Yeah,
because it's mind-numbingly boring sometimes.
It can be.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, and there's certainly some hobbyists though where it is not mind-numbingly boring, and they just drink it up. And this,
right.
Like
for a large portion of the population, though, eyes glaze over and fall asleep, and so that's what I've got on the Gain Twist stuff. So if you want to go to the
let's go to the request lines here, and I appreciate you bringing. Obviously, you always bring awesome slides for the viewer. I think that's really great, and I'm really curious over the next months, years, whatever, to see how your modeling aligns with some of the testing that we'll inevitably end up doing. That's going to be really exciting.
The HIT Target Impact Indicator. Instant hit confirmation at extended ranges has never been easier. The HIT Target Impact Indicator easily attaches to most target stands and not the steel target itself. The highly sensitive internal accelerometer detects vibration when the target is impacted, activating the red LED lights that flash Morse code for HIT. Where impact confirmation can be difficult, light it up with the HIT Target Impact Indicator from Hornady.
So, going to the request line, we had a bunch of questions come in. Now, a lot of them, if you're listening and your question's not answered here, I might just go through and answer some of those either on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever you commented, because they weren't really related to you guys.
Okay.
But I'm going to chicken hawk some of the ones that are ballistic engineer questions, right? So right off the bat, we got Ted Hoger, and Ted asks, barrel harmonics and bullet force in the barrel curve. Some ballisticians have theories that the barrel harmonics might have a correlation to the change in the bore dimensions during pressurization. Do we know if the diameter of the chamber and bore gets larger due to pressure? And if so, how much? And do we know if the barrel elongates due to pressure? Do you think that these things could have a play in the idea of barrel harmonics and load tuning? So, a lot to unpack there. Does pressurization increase the bore diameter, and does it stretch things out a little bit longer? And if so, do you think those things influence, air quote, load tuning and barrel harmonics, which is a buzzword?
I heard Jeff's favorite word like 6 times in that question, so you better start with that, Jeff.
The harmonics word?
Yeah. If
there was one word that I could ban from all future ballistic discussions, it would be barrel harmonics. It's not harmonics, it's a force vibration. And the reason it's a force vibration is because it's driven by the bullet passage through the barrel. It's got nothing to do with if I tap the barrel, what's its natural frequency.
Okay.
It's got nothing to do with that. Does the barrel grow? Yes, absolutely. I did some finite element analysis on a 30 cal barrel. Gosh, it's got to be 10 years ago anyway, maybe more like 15. And on a 30 caliber barrel subjected to 60,000 PSI internal pressure, the bore growth was on the order of about a half a thou max.
Okay.
Okay. So the bullets shoot like they've got in the neighborhood of 2/10,000ths of an inch in-bore clearance. Somehow it magically gets better. We don't understand that.
But it does grow.
And as a result, yes, it also grows in length. So, do those two factors play into quote barrel motion, barrel transverse motion? I think they probably can.
Sure.
I think they depends on how and where the bullet fetches up with the barrel.
Okay.
So, yeah. Can they? Yeah, they can.
Can it influence the tuning of the load, the dispersion?
So I think, again, this is my opinion as an engineer. I think for copper bullets, it's a little more straightforward. For cup and core bullets, because the lead core can move, cause that jacket to swell out, things are not as nice and linear as they would be with the copper bullets.
Okay.
So copper bullets, are they easier generally speaking? I think we've answered that once before. If you had to pick a bullet that would fire in a wide variety of barrels, you'd pick the cup and core bullet.
Yeah, you'd pick a lead core bullet.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of interaction going on. There's a lot of interaction going on.
So yes, it grows.
Does that answer that question?
Yes, it grows. Harmonics is not actually what's happening. And could it affect the dispersion? Maybe. Depends on where it happens.
It depends
I
on.
expect it to be a factor.
Yeah.
I expect it to be a factor.
It's dependent on as that bullet exits the muzzle, what is that thing doing?
Yeah, but you don't really get to play with that so much.
No, that's out of your control. So if you made, let's just do a little thought experiment here. If you made the barrel infinitely large in diameter, you'd still be moving the bore some. Okay? Would it still be half a thou? It might be 4/10. Kind of.
Yeah.
You might cut it some. So, it's you can't get away from it. It's going to move.
And that's the key takeaway for me is that you don't get to control that movement, and so your idea of harmonics and tuning aren't related to what's going on.
Right. Now, he also asked a question in there about resistance, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
Bore pressure, didn't he say that?
So some ballisticians have theories that the barrel harmonics might have a correlation to the change in bore dimensions during pressurization.
Well, the other factor here is the shot-to-shot change in engraving pressure is a big number, and it is kind of the lion's share of the shot-to-shot, the cause of the shot-to-shot swings in pressure and velocity. So, for a well-behaved system, the correlation between pressure and velocity, if you do like a lot acceptance test, that correlation is usually pretty good for a bottleneck cartridge. It's, up at 0.85 and higher. Other cartridges, not like straight wall cartridges.
Yep.
Not so good. But that pressure variation is what drives the pressure time changes to a large extent.
Okay.
To a large extent.
I would add to that, a lot of our historical reloading data was gathered using strain gauges on a barrel, which are measuring essentially that expansion. So,
right.
Yeah, 100%. It
Okay.
happens.
So interesting.
It happens so much so that you can use it as a basic tool to quasi-measure pressure.
So eons ago, I was involved with a test on a high velocity fixture, and we were trying to figure out the interior ballistic cycle because it was, half a hat full of powder shooting 30 millimeter bullets at 5,000 feet per second, right? And we put strain gauges on the OD of a constant diameter barrel. And what we use for timing marks in terms of where the bullet passed under each of the strain gauges was where the strain went from negative compression through 0 to positive in tension. And so as the bullet runs down, it's prying the back end of the barrel out, and it makes it pinches it in.
Wow.
It pinches it in.
Remarkable.
So that was kind of one of the lessons learned.
That I would have never guessed that, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we mounted the strain gauges directly to the barrel. We didn't put them like on hose clamps or something like that. Right. So yeah, that was an interesting thing.
All right, moving on to a question from Shane Bryan. Obviously, Shane, a widely successful, him and his wife, Jacqueline, successful ELR competitor. Shane wrote in and asked, is there anything meaningful that someone at home can do to lower BCSD, such as sorting bullets by weight or length? Specifically interested in terms of ELR shooting. A lot to unpack there. First and foremost, you could briefly talk about some of the, I don't want to say errors, but some of the smoke and mirrors of BCSD. Ultimately, though, what he's asking is how can I get more consistent bullets and lower my drag variability? Is there anything I can do at home aside from just selecting the right bullet out of the gate? Any sorting mechanism that they could do?
Sure. Yeah. So BCSD, as he asked the question, that's a sticky term because ballistic coefficient varies as a function of velocity. SD is a form of measurement of a variation. So that gets muddy. I wouldn't use BCSD. You can do it, but it comes with a bunch of boxes you got to check
caveats,
to do it right.
Yep. A lot of caveats. Yeah.
But I think what he's asking more generally is drag variability. Can I do something at home that allows me to improve the drag variability of the bullets I'm using? He asked about weight and length. The length aspect. So the drag that you're concerned with is the shape drag of the bullet. And so if there's something that you can do to ensure that the shape is more consistent, bullet to bullet to bullet, that would help with drag variability. I would say with modern day match bullets, it's probably not real necessary.
Yeah.
They're all going through the same tooling. The shape is going to be the same. You'll see sorting methods like based ogive measurements. You could do that. You're going to have to analytically figure that out, right? You're going to have to go measure it and see if you can measure a difference on target. I can't tell you if you do this, that will happen. I can tell you from a weight standpoint, if you have bullet weight variation, that is not necessarily a shape drag variation, but it will manifest itself in the same manner.
Okay.
So if I go do a radar test and have a wide variation in bullet weight, but I assume that it's the same, I will see variation from the results that I'm assuming is shape drag variation because I'm assuming the weight is the same, although the weight will be driving the variation that I'm seeing. So if you go weigh a bunch of your bullets and they're variable and you want to weigh sort them, it can't hurt. If you want to do length,
half a grain?
Yeah, if you want to do length, I mean, length is it's not the main driver of shape drag, right? Like you're looking at things like consistency of ogive radius, consistency of me-plat, consistency of boat tail angle and boat tail length, and all of those sorts of shapes. If you could sort those, you would have a better probability of having a positive effect.
Yeah. Okay. So
my experience, at least in terms of weight variability, is it's usually under 0.2%.
Okay.
And drag variability, if you're at 0.5%, you're doing pretty good. Okay. So that 0.2 is kind of buried in the 0.5 number, unfortunately.
Yep.
So I mean, weight sorting probably won't hurt you.
Not going to help.
I don't know how much it's going to help. I mean, and then comes the only way the home hobbyist can determine whether or not the shape drag variability has hurt them is to monitor, yes, bullet weight, but also muzzle velocity and then impact point on target at extended ranges.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
because you don't have a Doppler radar,
Right.
a long range Doppler radar.
And you're still at the mercy. You're measuring your measurement is vertical impact on target. There's 5 different influences that go into that, and you're accounting for one, which is also measuring your muzzle velocity as you shoot those. So even though you do that measurement, you're still at the mercy of 4 other unmeasured influences affecting the vertical.
Along with the initialization jump.
Along with the nut behind the bolt.
Doing his part.
Yeah.
Another thing is the drag variability is not equal barrel to barrel to barrel.
Sure, some
the
barrels.
combination of a given bullet, given barrel, given powder will have a tendency to produce a given amount of drag variation.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, we did see that during the test that we did for the government, a decade ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean that there are certain barrel twist rates and bore land shapes that are better than others, and something to go look at.
So it sounds like not a whole lot you can do at home other than choose the correct bullet right out of the gate. Our A-tip match bullet going to be, for ELR, that is the bullet, and there's some other good ones out there, but choose a bullet that is manufactured extremely tight match grade tolerances.
Right. Would you say that a tip bullet is likely to have less variability than a non-tip bullet?
Yes, because of the consistency of the shape. Because what you're doing in the manufacturing process of that is cutting it off at a consistent location on the ogive.
Yep.
And you're placing a tip that's been made the same tip to tip to tip, so you can ensure more consistency of the shape.
Yeah, that was going to be my thought as well.
We've documented really good drag variability on Bowtail Hollow Point designs, but as soon as you change the lot numbers and then you start to compare, then you start to lose some of that because you're not swedging up the same. So choose a good bullet out of the gate, Shane. That's probably the best thing you can do. Obviously, he's winning with A-tips out there, trying to get the competitive edge though, and just some misunderstanding about how muddy BC variability is compared to actual drag variability.
Sure.
All right, this is a quick one. Does the twist rate affect pressure, chamber pressure? Twist rate affect chamber pressure? That question came in from Cameron Schmidt.
In my experience, no.
Yeah, not in enough. I'm sure there's some level of effect, right? But it's eclipsed by so many other variables. I haven't seen it in the testing that I've done.
Okay.
Yeah,
And if I have seen it, it's on the order of like 500 to 1,000 pounds of pressure,
It would
which
probably
is
be difference
eclipsable
from-
by a whole bunch of things.
Barrel to barrel.
Sure.
Okay.
So the thing that pops to my mind is if you compared a really, really exceptionally fast twist and you had let's just say outside of normal deposition of copper material in the driving edge of the lands, that would change the bore area, which would change the resistance pressure, which would change the velocity and the pressure.
Okay.
So under normal circumstances, I wouldn't expect it to be a factor.
Got it. All right. Question from Clayton Creel in good old Wyoming. Be safe out there, Clayton, serving the community out there. Appreciate what you do. He wrote in and asked, really enjoy the podcast, guys. This is a little bit more of a fun question. What are some of the best groups you've ever observed, particularly in our test and accuracy fixture for 20 or 30 shot samples?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I have a analysis tool that I built kind of for internal use, and it spits out this score that allows you to compare different data sets that might not be comparable on normal levels, right? Different sample sizes, whatever it may be. And the highest score that I've gotten out of that system was it was a 6mm. It was a 120 shot group that was, I think, like 0.91 inches at 100.
Okay.
And this
What metric is that? Mean radius?
That's extreme spread.
Extreme spread.
No. The scoring metric I have built takes into account it makes a valuation judgment of every shot radius, and then also has a multiplier or penalty value based on the confidence of the amount of shots that you fire.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, but man, on 20s or 30s, probably we've had plenty of sub half inch 20 or or 30 shotters. And when I mean plenty, I mean that's over. I've been here for 13 years. So it's not very common, right? Like I don't just go out, like I'm very, very, very excited and impressed when I see something like that.
Yep.
The majority, I would say, are somewhere between half and 1, probably.
And that's probably a -2.5 sigma ton of a number, right? I mean, that's you don't see those very often.
Rare.
You don't see those very often.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. So sub half, which is really good. Me personally, my smallest shoulder fired large sample, 20 or 30, was 1.3 inches with a HS Precision 6 Creedmoor shooting 110 A-tips.
At 200 or 100?
At 200.
At 200. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're just a touch
And that was
over
shoulder
a
fire.
half
That was the
minute.
most accurate barrel I think I've ever owned. That thing didn't care what you put in there.
Yeah, I have a Ruger Precision rifle that I have done some load development with, and I did get 140 grain ELDMs, and I always use mils.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah, for your
Unfortunately,
dispersion, yeah.
that's just kind of where I come from. So, but numbers in the 0.27 range.
Okay.
So that's for a 5-shot group.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good. And I need to shoot more of those.
Right.
The Hornady Security Fireproof Keypad Safe. With a heavy-duty 16-gauge steel body, extra-thick 8-gauge steel door, and 4 1-inch diameter locking lugs, the fireproof safe achieves a fire rating of 30 minutes for up to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Both the interior and adjustable shelf are covered in a protective carpet that offers flexible storage configurations while safeguarding valuables from damage. The Fireproof Keypad Safe from Hornady Security.
All right. So we got a question that came in from Magnus9048. Why do I see a different point of impact when I shoot a new batch of ammunition? So same ammo, same rifle, different lot number. What's going on there?
The most common cause is small sample sizes. So your mean point of impact of a given group, if the sample size is small, is going to wander about. And that's because you haven't fired enough shots to fully encompass your true cone of fire.
Sure.
So you're randomly sampling, small chunks in between them. You can start to visualize how your zero, your mean point of impact, is going to wander about from test to test to test. Mean point of impacts in shoulder-fired precision rifle systems that we test often with start to become stable enough that you're not going to easily see a shift in the point of impact in the 20 to 30 shot range.
Okay. So that, and then throw in the fact that it might have a different lot number propellant or a different propellant altogether.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the MPI wandering is related to the true dispersion divided by the square root of the number of shots fired. So that's how much you expect that thing to walk around.
Whoa.
Group to group to group. Like,
So
okay,
it's going to move regardless.
The dirty little secret is, like it or not, it's going to move because you're sampling.
Yep. Simple as that. All right. So moving on. Now this question came in from one Adam Very from our friends up in Canada.
I know Mr. Very.
Mr. Very asked, does JQ dye his beard?
What is that?
It's an old wooden ship used in the Civil War era.
Yeah.
And I can
I'm
tell
familiar now.
Adam Very, if you're watching, I can look and see all the gray hair in Jayden's beard. He does not dye his beard.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, Jayden's actually ingrained with that so much Chuck Norris DNA that his facial hair actually grows in all Chuck Norris like that on its own.
Accusations. But Adam, you can be assured that next time I see you, there will be an equal amount of trouble heading your way.
All right. Sam Ruger says, just for fun, what's the furthest you two have ever shot? Jeff, for you, I bet it's a long damn way.
Yeah. How far does a long rod go, Jeff?
Yeah. So but that was just an analytical study. That somebody asked us a question years and years ago. Long rod pointed up at the max QE angle, which is over 45 degrees, will go like 80 miles plus. Personally, I have killed moose at Crowden 300 yards. Done high power shooting with open sights back when I had decent eyes, 600 yards there. Haven't and I shot with eons ago with Joe Talen's rifle out at
at the range we used to go test at.
out in Lexington there. Shot out to 1,000 yards there with his pre-production Ruger Precision rifle.
I remember that.
And that's why I bought mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of the reasons that the Creedmoor really took off.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a slow burn with the 6.5 Creedmoor. RPR came out.
Wow.
Rocket sled on rails.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jayden, probably not 80 miles, but how far have you
81 miles. No,
yeah. Small cal, shoulder fired stuff.
I've done quite a bit of testing, and have shot quite a bit out past 2,000 meters. Done some stuff at 2,500, maybe a little bit beyond that, a time or two, but
2,500. I know during the heyday of the 300 PRC DoD conversations, man,
I was doing a lot of that.
You're doing a lot of that.
Yeah,
great stuff. All right,
handgun out to a couple hundred though.
Ooh,
that's always fun.
That's impressive.
That is. All right, next question comes in from Mason McNeil. Mason, longtime fan of the podcast, just got his 6 BRA built, looking good, shooting well. He asks, I'm curious how using the exact same powder, the same case, and the same primer in a sample size of 10, why I observe such horribly and wild SD and ES numbers with one bullet. And then I'll take those same components and switch to a bullet 2.5 grains lighter, and the ES and the SD are phenomenal. Now, my dispersion was horrible with said bullet, but what's happening between the relationship with the powder, bullet, and barrel that causes these things? With the twist rate was appropriate, powder was appropriate, rifle traditionally shot well, within my expectations for competing in the PRS, so the barrel isn't garbage. So he's saying in a 10-shot string, he's got a bullet, twist rate, everything's lined up. ES and SD were horrible, doesn't give exact numbers. Then he switches bullets and those numbers tighten up on a 10-shot sample.
Yeah, it would be nice to have what his expectations are for horrible and good. But with the information that he provided, the one thing that comes to mind is everything is fixed except the bullet. And the bullet is almost fixed in weight, right? He said it was 2 grains lighter.
2.5.
Don't know what he's shooting. If it's a 6mm, it's probably not that much different.
Yeah.
The one thing that can influence things in that early internal ballistic cycle quite a bit is shape differences of the bullet and the amount of jump the bullet has to the rifling. That will change the pressure time curve quite a bit on that early little piece.
Okay. And he said dispersion wasn't great either way, so didn't change the dispersion, but the velocity spread went down.
Yeah. And I mean, that could cause, I wouldn't expect it to necessarily. I haven't seen that happen where it goes wild with simply just a chain. And even within that class, right? If you're talking, let's say he's shooting 100 plus grain 6mm and then one that's 2 grains lighter, those bullets are going to have to be fairly similar in shape to be at the same weight in the same caliber, right? There's only so much you can do within that caliber restriction. But
sure.
I would want to have a better understanding of what his expectations are, because if he's expecting an SD of 5, or he gets an SD of 5 off of a 10 shot, and then he gets an SD of 13 off of a 10 shot, and he says that 13 is horrible, I would want to do a bunch more testing before I claimed that those two were actually different.
Sure.
And I like your thoughts about the ogive shape being different and the jump to the rifling being different. That's a button. Like in quick load, there's no button for that. So the software that I'm running, we can change the free run to the start of engraving.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thought is, if the velocity variability is up, then probably also the pressure variability is up.
Likely.
Because there's no free lunch, right? I would, that'd be kind of the first thing I'd start looking at.
Yeah. That and sample size. It's very possible that it's the exact same ammo.
Well, plus the other thing he didn't say is, what about bullet construction? Are they both cup and core bullets? Is one cup and core, one a CX? Yeah.
There you go.
I mean,
sure.
What else?
Awesome.
What else?
Mason, send me a DM or email it in to podcast@hornady.com. Try to get some more information from you. We'll get some more information from these guys. All right. Jayden, this one's directed at you, not about the beard. Nathan Klinsky. He asked, this is a great question. So the 6mm arc, one of my personal favorite cartridges, he asked, with the 6mm arc, what was the load, barrel accuracy, terminal performance expectations that met the required demands by that unnamed U.S. military organizations, and did that specification require suppression?
I'm going to have to be kind of vague.
Yeah, obviously.
If the people that it was for was unnamed, then the specs that they required will remain unnamed. But barrel length-wise, it had to, so the system it was trying to offset, I think I've discussed that openly, that the goal was to, meet or exceed 7.62 by 51 or 308 Winchester performance out of an AR-10.
Mm-hmm. With an 18-inch barrel, right? Or
well,
20?
so barrel
16.
length, that would have been out of a 16 was common for that era. So the 6 arc would have been using an 18.
Right.
Because with the shorter AR-15 receiver, you can pick up 2 inches of barrel length with the same
footprint
system length of the entire gun.
Perfect.
It had to meet or exceed what the 308 did at closer range and longer range for dispersion and terminal performance.
Okay.
Shootability was already better. There's not much comparison there, right?
No, not even a little bit.
Your ability to stay on target, all those kind of nuanced things. That was obvious that there was benefits there. But terminal and dispersion had to be equal to or greater than.
Perfect. And that was which bullet? The one in our tap line, probably.
It would have been I can't tell you which bullet.
Okay. It was a bullet.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Are
and
you talking
suppressed,
on the 6mm
Yeah,
side? Oh,
yeah.
okay. I thought you were asking about the 30 cal that it was being compared to.
No.
Yes, that would be the 106 tap. Yeah.
Okay. And suppressed, of course. Pretty standard. All right. So moving on now, Dave Swift, he asks, will using a Magnum primer increase chamber pressure?
It can. Won't always.
Won't always.
Not all Magnum.
There are a lot of variables here. Like
Yeah.
what's the case volume, for instance? What powder are you using?
Not all Magnum primers are the same. But it can. But even if it does, it's typically on the order of a couple thousand pounds from my experience. Maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 pounds
At most.
on average, right?
Sure.
Like you could have a circumstance where it's probably higher, and you can have circumstances where it
Super
doesn't show.
small case.
Yeah. So there was an article in the most recent Hodgdon manual where they used primers as a variable, and Magnums were in there. Sample sizes, unfortunately, were small, 5 shots. The swings between Magnum and standard primers were 10% pressure. Like, holy mackerel, that's
quite a bit.
That's a big swing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it could, maybe not, depends on the situation. Small case capacity, maybe a fast burning propellant, then you
Right.
shove a Magnum
Right.
primer in there.
Yeah. There's a wide window to that answer.
Yeah,
Sure.
and it depends entirely, I think, on the volume of the cartridge case. I mean, I loaded some samples for my nephew, and I got the primers kind of bollocksed up, and I put together 20 cartridges, and some of them had Magnum primer, some of them had large rifle bench rest primers. I sent them away to be tested, and the results came back, and we
Tit for tat.
couldn't pick the stuff out of the pepper. Just you couldn't tell the difference.
Okay.
So, but
Situation
that's
dependent.
that bullet, that powder, that cartridge.
Yep.
That and those primers, like that, and one temperature. So that's a very complex question.
I would say expect that it will and move forward accordingly.
Yeah.
Meaning if you're doing reloading or hand loading, hey, drop your charge rate back down to a moderate charge weight and work your way back up again because you changed a variable.
You
Sage
don't want
advice.
to. You don't want to get hurt doing
Yeah.
this.
Yes.
Yep. You don't want to find out about that stuff at high pressure. You want to find out about it before it's a problem. All right. Question came in from John Christopher. He asked, my uncle and I are doing some shooting with light bullets in a 223, shooting 55 grain FMJs out of a 1-in-7 twist. Of course, the groups are not so good. Can you guys maybe walk through the start to finish of why the dispersion is bad? There's a lot to unpack right there because there's a whole bunch of stuff he left out, but you got a 223 shooting a 55 grain FMJ with a 1-in-7 twist. What are some things that you think might add to a little bit larger dispersion? He doesn't say bolt or gas gun, but right there could be a big variable, which is that it's in a gas gun.
Yeah. Well, 55 FMJs haven't won as many matches as I'm aware of as some other bullet designs.
Yeah.
So first thing I would look at is switching to probably like you want a lightweight 22 cal bullet. That's going to push you into the varmint world.
Sure.
The varmint world requires good dispersion, right? So go shoot some VMAXs and see what that does for you. Changing propellant that would be my first recommendation after the bullet choice, right? I would say in this circumstance, change your bullet before the powder. A 55 FMJ in general is going to be a volume application.
Yeah.
Right?
Have you got a ELD VT bullet in 22 for that?
Not in 223.
Yeah,
We do have a 22 cal, but it's too long to fit mag length.
Oh.
So you wouldn't be able to load it. And
Okay.
if we made one short enough to fit mag length, it would be a 53 grain VMAX.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
6-1 F doesn't the other.
Yeah.
So why they shoot bigger groups is yes the FMJ, because you pack the bullet from the back end.
mhm.
That's a problem. We'll talk about that elsewhere. But the other issue is the jump equation tells you that you want the slowest twist that'll stabilize the bullet.
And a 1 and 7's
And a
pretty
1 and
spinny.
7's pretty fast for that weight bullet. So
Yep. Lot going on there. Sage advice. So if you're shooting factory ammo, opt for something, maybe a VMAX, maybe try some match ammo.
Yeah.
You have the twist rate to really shoot any bullet ever loaded in 223 ever.
absolutely.
And if you're a hand loader, you can always try a different propellant. And if you're in a gas gun, it's on the average, it's just simply not going to shoot as good as a bolt gun.
Right.
Yep. So then a whole slew of questions that I'm not going to pin for you guys. They're more for us to answer, mainly new product stuff like that. So we announced new products in October for the listener. Well, those products are 2025 products. We announce them in October to get people excited about what's coming up in 2025. Anything we ship prior to 2025 is a bonus because they're the next year's product. So as far as the trimmer, 338 arc, all that stuff goes, we are desperately trying to get stuff out anytime in this last quarter of the year. But just know that they are products for the next year. That trimmer, that's made just a few miles away from where I'm sitting. So as soon as we can get those manufactured, there's been a huge demand for those. We'll start shipping those. Same thing with the 338 ARC. It's being loaded and packaged right now for some early industry partners. And, we'll get that stuff coming really quick. Load data, handbook, etc. Yeah, a lot of other questions that, again, really aren't for you guys. So with that, I don't have any more questions from the internet, but I am really glad that, one, we got to talk about that gain twist with the monolithic bullets. That's kind of the leading edge of this type of experiment. And two, we really got to digress into Jayden's beard, which was a really nice treat.
Should I dye it? Is there a suggestion, not a question there? There's way more gray coming in.
It might be Clairol.
Yeah. All right, guys. Is there anything you want to leave the listener with on this episode of Ask Us Anything Q&A, and then that gain twist?
If I'm able to twist somebody's arm into building the gain twist and the testing gets done, I will certainly, to the extent I'm able to share, I will share it with you.
I'll hold you to it, Jeff. Thank you, Jayden. Anything else?
No, it's always fun answering the questions and kind of seeing where people's heads are at and how they're digesting information that people are learning in the industry and in the community, and that's really cool. I'm still learning. You're still learning.
Obviously.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, if you had told me 5 years ago when I retired, was I going to be,
Doing
kind
this much
of
work.
digging at this stuff? It's like, really?
Yeah.
I couldn't leave it alone. And the answer is no, I couldn't.
All right. Well, that's how fascinating it is and how enjoyable this hobby is. And for the advanced hobbyist, need to get out there and you need to purchase a copy of Ammunition Demystified. Again, that has been such a great resource. And Jeff, Jayden, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode, diving into some Q&A and also a little bit deeper into the gain twist function and really seeing how many shots it takes to prove just a little bit of improvement. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.